Hello everyone. In this video, we are discussing the top 10 process manufacturing ERP systems in 2025. So let's dive right in.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
My name is Sam Gupta. I am principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent vendor agnostic technology advisory firm. We help our clients with digital transformation, strategy, system selection, change management. On that note, let's go back to today's topic, which is the top 10 process manufacturing ERP systems in 2025. Before we dive into the list, let's review how we define process manufacturing as far as the scope of this particular list goes. So obviously, the process manufacturing is going to be relevant, but this list captures every single business model, all the value chain players that might be operating in the process manufacturing ecosystem. They could be the pure play manufacturing companies or the distribution companies, consulting service centric businesses, whatever may have process manufacturing as part of their business model, or they might be serving the process manufacturing value chain. In general, in this space, the market is very fragmented, even among the process manufacturers. The fragmentation exists because of the differences in the product types. So it's going to be very hard to find the kind of suite that you can find in the discrete manufacturing space. Overall, when it comes to defining process manufacturing space compared to your discrete manufacturing, here the products are very formula based. And the way these formulations work is you are going to have some sort of recipe formula for your food pharma-centric businesses, as opposed to just using the inventory as a whole. So that's a real difference between your discrete and process manufacturing systems. And in general, the process manufacturing becomes very complex because of this formula and the changes that you need to make from the ingredient perspective. One change in one ingredient could affect the entire formula, and that's why this is so complex in general. And these formulas are going to be very different, and each of the sub-industries among process manufacturers. So that's why the systems are very different. The market is very fragmented as well. Now, we'll be talking about some of these nuances as we discuss each of the systems on this list. Some of the criteria that we have used to compile this list is the product share, the acquisitions strategy. If that is focused on process manufacturing, they generally rank higher on this list. And then you have the product roadmap, community, ecosystem, win rate, technology strategy, as well as the investors. So now let's look at the list. Number 10 on our list is Acumatica. And Acumatica natively does not have support for process manufacturing. But in general, when you look at different process manufacturing systems, you may not find as many standardized systems or systems from the mainstream vendors just because they don't have enough market share in these verticals. And that's why the majority of the manufacturing software products are positioned for discrete centric industries. But with Acumatica, one of the advantages that you are going to get is the add-on that they have, or they have a couple of add-ons in their ecosystem, but the primary add-on or the mainstream one, which is coded really well, it's very well productized. If you look at that, then the experience that you are going to get is going to be very similar to how Acumatica is coded. So that's one of the biggest advantage of Acumatica for process manufacturing. In general, the constraints related to Acumatica, for example, it is relevant for companies that might be operating in a couple of countries. It's not necessarily a global system when you look at the global capabilities, whether or any sort of complex enterprise capabilities, whether you look at things such as your multi-entity accounting. And again, multi-entity accounting could have many different layers. When you look at the larger businesses, they require a lot of capabilities from the shared services business model. Obviously, those capabilities are not going to be there with Acumatica, but the companies that are going to be smaller in size, maybe single entity or a couple of entities in a couple of or handful of countries, for those scenarios, Acumatica is going to be a great fit. Overall, the product aspects of Acumatica and financially and globally, it might not be as mature for the larger companies, but operationally, Acumatica system is rich. And generally, the way the construction of the product is, it can accommodate a lot of different business models, and those business models are going to be relevant from the process manufacturing perspective as well. For example, process manufacturing companies, they do a lot of business in the e-commerce space as well, because in general, in this space, the products are going to be fairly commoditized. So they are going to have B2B, B2C centric play. And then Acumatica does have very strong ecosystem as well as the capabilities aligned to those distribution centric businesses, as well as retail centric businesses. Then you are also going to have field service components. So even if you are going to be slightly more food or pharma centric businesses, generally they are going to have the local logistics that they need to maintain, just because the logistics is going to be very hard. In general, they might not be able to meet the MQ or the constraints that they are going to have with the logistics vendors. And that's why they need to maintain their in-house fleet. And when they have to do that, they are going to have a lot of field service aspects of the business model as well, and Acumatica does accommodate that. And then you are going to have a little bit of construction. Construction may not be as relevant from the process manufacturing perspective, but there might be some verticals where those construction centric aspects may be equally relevant as well. So the advantage with Acumatica is that it can accommodate a lot of these different business models as part of the same product, as opposed to keeping different databases where your communication is going to be a challenge, and operationally it's going to be really rich. So some of these trends to keep in mind from the Acumatica perspective for process manufacturing. Number one, technology, and technology in general of Acumatica was very cloud native. As such, that's not necessarily a process manufacturing capability, but let's say if you value technology a lot more, then Acumatica could be a great fit. The core ERP layers in general, they are very strong, even though it's a relatively smaller system compared to the other systems that we have on this list, especially the ones that are going to be focused on the upper mid-market enterprise. And then one of the other aspects for Acumatica is going to be the seasonality. And in general, in the food business, you are going to find business models where they may have substantial seasonal components, and because of that, the demand is going to be higher in those seasons. So sometimes they need to hire temporary workers, and if they need to do that, the licensing becomes trickier with 90% of the ERP systems, because you are signing the deal for, let's say, 3 years, 5 years, from the ERP licensing perspective, but then you have to scale your demand only for those seasons. In those cases, Acumatica can work out really well, just because that is the unlimited user business model. So for that, these seasonal centric businesses could be a great fit. But at the same time, the transactional businesses are not necessarily the best fit for the Acumatica pricing, just because based on the transactions, the pricing does increase. So that's going to be a little con overall from the Acumatica's alignment for seasonal businesses. Now, some limitations to keep in mind is the quality, as well as the process manufacturing module that I mentioned. That's going to be through a third party. So you are looking at dealing with many different vendors, ownership with many different vendors, and sometimes there could be implementation issues because of that. Sometimes there could be communication issues because of that. Things might change as the vendor relationship changes. So there is going to be a little bit of risk from that perspective. So that's going to be a little con. And again, this is not necessarily relevant or suitable for companies that require either global consolidation or they have a substantial global footprint. For those companies, Acumatica may not be the best fit. And again, it's not necessarily designed for the larger companies. So if you are going to be in that under $100 million range, then Acumatica could be a great fit. So that's number 10. Now, number 9 on our list is ECI DCOM. Overall, from the size perspective, and we at Elevate IQ are big proponent of the size of the system, because each system is designed for very specific capacity, very specific transaction volume, and the size of the business as well as the business model. So size matters when it comes to selecting the systems. So ECIDCOM is going to be a smaller system compared to Acumatica, but that smaller systems means that it's going to be easier to install, easier to use, but at the same time, you are not going to have as many folds, layers, what you are going to get with Acumatica. ECIDCOM is a purpose-built system for process manufacturing, and that's why the smaller companies are going to find it slightly more relatable, because they have modeled the operational aspect a lot more, but the financial aspects may not be as strong. Overall, from the inventory layers perspective or the ERP layers perspective, they have taken a lot of different shortcuts in the way they have built their model, just because they are prioritizing the operational aspect of the system, and the financial aspect is going to be slightly weaker. But the companies in this segment don't necessarily care for very deep MRP planning center capabilities or the deep financial processes. So for those, ECIDCOM is a great fit. But once you grow bigger, then you are probably going to require all of those. So for those companies, ECIDCOM is not going to be a great fit. So overall, again, from the size perspective, ECIDCOM is slightly smaller system than Acumatica. The kind of target market segment that ECIDCOM is serving is relatively smaller. So overall, you will find very deep operational capabilities. For example, catch weight is going to be really tricky with systems such as Acumatica, because they are not necessarily natively designed for process manufacturing. You have concepts such as your potency, and those concepts may be very difficult to model with slightly more generalized systems. Even though they are going to have add-ons, they are going to have all of these capabilities. But if the system is not naturally designed to handle these processes or data sets, sometimes that could be tricky. Now, from the ECIDCOM perspective, overall, the implementation is going to be easier, especially for the smaller companies that might be limited on budget. So those are some of these trends. Now, some limitations to keep in mind. Again, those ERP layers will be limited. So you might be able to go on ECIDCOM maybe up to $50 million, $100 million. But after that, let's say if you require those financial layers, that's where you are probably going to outgrow ECIDCOM. But for the smaller companies that are looking for a purpose-built system without requiring very expensive implementation, then again, ECIDCOM is going to be a great fit. It's not as diverse to be able to accommodate as many business models, the kind of things that Acumatica is able to do. So that's going to be a little challenge, as well as the ecosystem is very small. In general, they don't have a lot of vendor partners, reseller partners. So that's going to be a little limitation for ECIDCOM, and that's number 9. Number 8 on our list is Syspro. And Syspro overall, from the sizing perspective, might be similar to Acumatica. In general, Syspro is also designed for slightly more single entity operations. They are not going to have as complex, as strong multi-entity centric capabilities, the ones that larger companies are going to require. For example, multi-entity project accounting or inventory accounting. Sometimes those layers could be limited, even though they are going to have some support for multi-entity capabilities, but naturally it is designed for those single entity operations. The advantage with Cispro compared to, for example, Acumatica as well as ECID-COM again is a smaller system. Cispro is going to have a lot more layers, so that's why it is comparable with Acumatica. Now, Acumatica uses an add-on for the process manufacturing component for Cispro. Cispro is going to have a lot of those layers natively built as part of the system, so you are not necessarily dealing with the third-party vendors, third-party companies, as well as add-ons. So that's a huge risk reduction overall. But overall, when you compare Cispro and Acumatica is probably going to have much larger ecosystem. You are going to find a lot more add-ons, as well as the players, especially if you're building that best-of-breed architecture. From the toolset perspective, whether you're looking for different e-commerce vendors or CAD vendors, PLM vendors, and these all are going to be relevant for the architecture. With Cispro, you might need to integrate a lot of those things yourself. The advantage with Cispro, at least in 2025, the recent update that they have been doing, Number one, there has been a private equity change with Cispro. So that's a huge plus for Cispro. They are receiving a lot of investment in growing their footprint, especially in North America. They have done a lot of different acquisitions recently in accommodating the warehouse capabilities, as well as they have done one integration acquisition as well. And that's a huge plus. So now, and this one, the integration acquisition that you have from the Cispro perspective, it's very AI centric, and AI centric capabilities are far easier to model, far easier to implement in general. So they might be able to do a lot of these integrations in a very short time. So that gap that was there between Cispro, Acumatica, as well as NetSuite, that might be reduced in the future just because of these integrations. But again, Acumatica, NetSuite, they might catch up on those capabilities as well. Some more strengths from the Cispro perspective is the way they have their inventory layers designed. And some of these layers are very relevant for food and beverage centric businesses, process manufacturing businesses. And if you are familiar with SAP, then Cispro is going to feel familiar just because it was always very strong from the accounting finance perspective. So that is going to be one strength compared to, for example, let's say if you compare this with ECID-COM. ECID-COM is not going to have as strong inventory and financial accounting layers. Cispro is going to have far deeper layers from the accounting finance perspective. So if you are strong there, then you will like Cispro more. The formulation and recipe support that is native as part of the product compared to Acumatica. Acumatica utilizes add-on. And then your discrete and process manufacturing solution is going to be part of the same package. You are going to find a lot of verticals where they use both process as well as your discrete manufacturing capabilities. So depending upon your business model, if you are going to be primarily more of the process manufacturing company, but you may have a little bit of discrete component, whether you are building a packaging or whatever, those could be discrete layers from the manufacturing perspective. But with Cispro, you can accommodate both of these production lines as well as processes as part of the same system. With other systems that might be designed either for process or discrete, they might not have those layers baked as part of the product itself. Some limitations to keep in mind: when you get into the depth of process manufacturing, there are going to be a lot of different capabilities that might not be built natively as part of Cispro. So that's where you will require a lot more add-ons. And again, it gets very, very, very deep from the process manufacturing perspective. And sometimes these ERP vendors don't even want to work in those verticals just because they are so complex, so unique. So again, Catchweight itself gets very complex in terms of their scale, integration, etc. With some systems, you are going to find all of that because they do a lot more business in those spaces. But Cispro might be limited in a lot of those areas. But let's say if you are going to be in spaces where you have the lighter process manufacturing, lighter discrete manufacturing, for example, medical device is a great example. If you have that, in general, the discrete as well as, again, unless you are building some sort of CapEx, large medical device equipments, then it's a different case. But if you are building smaller medical devices, they are going to have a little bit of process component and discrete component. For those, Cispro is a great fit. Overall, from the suite perspective, the capabilities are going to be limited. You will not find as many integrations as you can find with the other systems on this list. And the global capabilities are limited as well. Again, this is designed for single country, maybe fewer countries, sort of workloads. It's not necessarily the upper mid market enterprise centric system with very deep layers for financial accounting, etc. Those are some of the limitations, and that's number 8. Number 7 on our list is SAP S4 HANA. And SAP S4 HANA, when you look at the system, it's going to have a lot more enterprise centric processes from the finance, accounting, inventory, MRP, the kind of things that these upper mid market companies or the enterprise companies are going to need from the corporate accounting perspective, they might not be as relevant at the plant level for the smaller companies. That's why SAP S4 HANA does really well with those larger workloads. Now, SAP S4 HANA does have a slightly leaner version or designed for mid-market. But again, it's not going to have as deep operational capabilities that you can find with some of the other systems on this list. So some strengths to keep in mind from the SAP S4 HANA perspective. Number 1, it is proven for very large workloads. And sometimes that might be limited to handling just the corporate financial layer, and they might be using other operational systems in the tier 2 architecture. That is always a possibility, but SAP S4 HANA can do a lot more heavy lifting in general in accommodating a lot of different business models along with the process manufacturing. Those capabilities are natively built. You will still require a lot more add-ons in general because it's a very generic vanilla system as well as configuration and customization. So that's why your implementation is probably going to be slightly more expensive, and the product is going to be expensive as well because you are buying a lot of enterprise capabilities. Some more strengths to keep in mind, overall, the diversity of the solution. So let's say if you have very complex business models, you have many different layers from the process, discrete, distribution, etc. If you have all of those, then SAP S4 HANA could be a great fit. SAP S4 HANA also does well when you are trying to streamline all of the entities in your portfolio so that you can do easy spin-off, easy merges in the private equity portfolio, depending upon the business context, etc. For those cases as well, SAP S4 HANA does really well. Overall, from the global compliance as well as localization perspective, it can support a lot more countries. So in some countries, some of these systems might not even be relevant. So your only choice is going to be SAP, Microsoft, Oracle, maybe. If that is the case, then SAP is going to be a great fit. Some limitations to keep in mind is the overall last mile capabilities, whether you look at the suite or you look at the capabilities such as your potency, catch weight, etc. Those are not going to be pre-built, pre-baked for that you might be looking at add-on. And obviously, this is going to be slightly more expensive implementation just because the system is larger. And overall, it does require the IT maturity inside your own organization, just because you have a lot more layers that you need to understand. You need to fold them accordingly to your business processes, and that's a very heavy lift for most of the companies. So that's number 7. Now, number 6 on our list is QAD. And QAD is a very interesting system. It does really well in the supply chain centric spaces. It does have the process manufacturing component, but for the most part, when you get into the depth of the process manufacturing, QAD might not even want to be compete in a lot of those spaces. Sometimes they have add-on. For example, let's say if you are using QAD for pharma, there might be some vendors who might supply add-on, but natively it does not do as well in the depth of process manufacturing when you are going to have large medical device companies or maybe plastic companies from the automotive perspective. They have a little bit of discrete component as well as process component. For those scenarios, QAD may be a great fit. QAD is also a great fit for food and beverage centric companies as well, just because it does have the process manufacturing, discrete manufacturing, but it's not going to have the same depth that you might find with some of the other systems that we have on this list. So QAD, overall, the construction, the architecture that QAD has, it's very different. They have a lot of component from the supply chain suite perspective, and these components will generally reside in the specialized supply chain suites. For example, Blue Yonder, Manhattan, these are different supply chain suites where your SNOP, your WMS, TMS, this is going to reside in one layer. And then generally for these companies, for example, let's say if you look at retail-centric businesses, for those businesses, they don't necessarily care for the integrated inventory components or integrated costing components, the ones that are going to be relevant in slightly more B2B centric spaces. So generally, they are going to have a GL, from the accounting perspective, and operational processes are residing inside the supply chain suite. So QAD does merge the component of supply chain plus your ERP, and that's a unique strength with QAD. Some of the developments in the QAD portfolio: number one, they have recently signed, I believe, partnership with Boomi, and that is very common across many different vendors. They have partnership with one of the iPaaS vendors. So generally, you are going to find a lot more alignment, a lot more integrations that are going to be pre-baked as part of the Boomi ecosystem. Either they are going to be QAD provided or Boomi provided or one of the third-party provided. So you are going to find a lot of that. QAD is developing, those integrated capabilities, and they are also acquiring many different systems to merge them as part of the portfolio. For example, they acquired Red Zone, and they are rewriting at this point of time because they were very legacy in general overall from the technology footprint perspective. So now they are rewriting it more for the cloud native technology interfaces. But by that time, most companies are probably going to require the AI native capabilities. So there are going to be a lot of changes overall from the ERP perspective. So QAD is working on a lot of that, which is a very exciting development. But overall, from the process manufacturing perspective, the supply chain suite plus the ERP suite is where their major secret sauce is, the way their product is designed and constructed. Any of the process manufacturing companies that are going to have some sort of discrete component, that's where QAD is probably going to be a great fit. And QAD is far more global solution compared to your, for example, you compare this with ECIDcom, Acumatica, or Syspro. They are relatively smaller solutions. QAD is much bigger. QAD is probably going to be a great replacement for the upper mid-market companies where they don't want to go for something like SAP or Oracle, because that is going to have much higher implementation price tag. And if they are trying to avoid, they are looking for a lot more integration out of the box, then QAD could be a great fit in those scenarios. Some limitations to keep in mind: again, the new technology is still being baked, so it might not be as stable. I don't know how many different installations they are going to have now, but still it is relatively newer in general. Overall, ecosystem is very tricky because they just don't have as many vendors as you are going to find with other slightly more horizontal systems. Acumatica, NetSuite, SAP are some of the names, and then the product is not going to be as diverse. So those are some of the limitations, and that's number 6. Number 5 on our list is Microsoft Dynamics 365 FNO. And FNO in general, or any Microsoft products, they do really well in the process manufacturing space. And the reason why they do really well in the process manufacturing space is, even though they are not going to have native capabilities baked for the process manufacturing, but they have a lot of add-ons just because these organizations are very fragmented. So the ISPs, the VARs, they are willing to develop these capabilities for their market share, but you might not find the mainstream product companies that are developing on top of Microsoft. But some financial companies or the ERP companies have developed on top of Microsoft systems. For example, Aptean has code base on top of Microsoft Dynamics Business Central. They might not have on top of FNO. FNO natively is going to have a lot more capabilities from the process manufacturing perspective, but overall, FNO is a very large system. It's going to be comparable to your SAP S/4HANA or Oracle. Some strengths to keep in mind is the comprehensive localization across the globe. So let's say if you are going to be in countries where you don't have some of these systems, for example, QAD, ECI, DCOM, etc., available, then your choice is probably going to be Microsoft Dynamics 365 FNO. Overall, their ecosystem is one of the largest. The consulting companies, the consultants that are operating on Microsoft products, it's just a lot. So you are not going to have problems finding the consultants, the expertise to be able to customize. But be careful with that, because sometimes that does fire back. Because if they don't have the business expertise or business modeling expertise, then you are going to have a lot of challenges just working directly with the developers. And that's a challenge we generally find in the Microsoft ecosystem. Some limitations to keep in mind is the last mile capabilities that you are going to find are going to be through third-party vendors. Even the integrations, some of these integrations, for example, if you compare this with QAD, QAD is going to supply a lot of these integrations as part of the suite. Microsoft will supply those through third-party vendors. So you're looking at a lot of different third-party vendors. So you have to figure out how these solutions are going to work together. And then you are going to have the vendor risk as well. So that is the limitation. The implementation is most likely going to be expensive, just because managing all of these vendor solutions, integrating them, testing them, requires a lot of effort in general. So that's why it's probably going to be slightly more expensive than your purpose-built systems. And then you do require a mature internal IT org, even for Microsoft products. So that's number 5. Number 4 on our list is Oracle Cloud ERP. And Oracle Cloud ERP is a very similar system as your SAP S/4HANA or Microsoft Dynamics 365 FNO. For the most part, Oracle has a little bit more penetration in the process manufacturing, food and beverage spaces. And the reason for that is because of their legacy product, JD Edward. JD Edward was always very well prevalent in the process manufacturing pharma-centric spaces. It has very deep capabilities for those companies, and that's why they are still retaining a lot of those logos. You are going to have those capabilities that are baked as part of Oracle Cloud ERP. The strengths to keep in mind is the layers that you have: the financial, the inventory, the MRP planning, supply chain, etc. All of that is geared towards the larger companies, upper mid-market. So when you are going to require those complex capabilities, either from the audit perspective or from the accounting perspective, they are going to be built as part of your Oracle Cloud ERP product. Overall, the diversity of the solution, that is going to be a big plus for Oracle Cloud ERP. Again, either you have very complex business model, or you are trying to acquire these capabilities by acquiring many different businesses, or you have some sort of private equity portfolio. In those cases, Oracle Cloud ERP is probably going to be a great fit. Some limitations to keep in mind is the last mile capabilities through third-party vendors. Again, very similar problem as your Microsoft or SAP, and the implementation is going to be expensive. And then this also requires a little bit of mature internal IT org. So those are some of the limitations, and that's number 4. Now, number 3 on our list is Aptean Process Manufacturing ERP. So comparing this with the other solutions that we have compared on this list, this is going to be purpose-built for process manufacturing companies, food and beverage-centric companies. So in this particular case, you are going to have a lot more as part of the suite that is pre-baked, pre-integrated. So your implementation cycle is going to be shorter. It's probably going to be cheaper as well. So that's a huge plus for these smaller companies who might not have as much budget. But at the same time, the constraint that you are looking at from this system perspective is it's a very pre-flavored system for a very specific business model. So tomorrow, let's say either if you acquire a specific capabilities, or you grow that capability internally from the business model perspective, you might outgrow this particular ERP, because you are sort of pigeonholing yourself in one specific business model. But let's say if your business model has always been consistent and it's expected to remain consistent even in the future, if that is the case, then Aptean Process Manufacturing ERP could be a great fit. So some strengths to keep in mind is fully integrated suite, complex process manufacturing capabilities in general, the kind of capabilities that you are not going to find with the generalized system, or they might be much harder to incorporate in those. Aptean Process Manufacturing is probably going to be pre-flavored with those capabilities. And they have a lot of different ERP products that they sell as part of the suite. These are not just the additions. The way Acumatica is, these are different products with different databases. So be careful in terms of which product you are buying, because you are going to get support for that specific product that has nothing to do with the other product that might be branded with the same bundle. From the marketing perspective, those are different products. So generally, the kind of products that they are bundling as part of process manufacturing, you have ROS, you have Process Pro, and these were designed for very specific business models, very specific capabilities, and they are only going to be relevant in very specific micro verticals. Just pay attention to that. And some limitations to keep in mind is expensive with partial implementation. So sometimes what companies do is, you know what, I really like Appian Process Manufacturing ERP. I'm probably going to go for that, but I'm not going to buy WMS from them. I'm going to buy WMS from somebody else. If you try to pick and choose, in those cases, generally the purpose-built ERP systems struggle because they don't have as robust ecosystem. So number one, your options are going to be limited. In their ecosystem, you're not going to find as many options from the WMS perspective or any other capabilities that you are trying to integrate with the system. And it's not going to be as diverse. So you might outgrow them fast if your business model is going to evolve in the future. So that is another thing that you need to keep in mind. And generally, their ecosystem and consulting base is going to be limited as well. That's with any purpose-built systems. So that's number 3. Number 2 on our list is Sage X3. And Sage X3 is slightly larger system compared to your Appian Process Manufacturing ERP. Sage X3 is going to have a lot more capabilities that is going to be pre-baked for process manufacturing. Those are built as well as the ecosystem, the way their ecosystem is constructed. You have a lot of different validation companies, which is going to be a need for the majority of the process manufacturing or the food or pharma-centric companies. So you have those ecosystems integrations that are part of Sage X3 ecosystem in general. And Sage X3 is far more proven in the process manufacturing space compared to the other systems. So for example, if you compare Sage X3 with SAP, Oracle Cloud, ERP, Microsoft, if you are going to compare them with Sage X3, you are going to find a lot more capabilities that are tailored towards those process manufacturing. But Sage X3 is also very, very strong from the accounting and finance perspective, just because that was always targeted or distributed through CPA firms. So it was always strong in that. Sage X3 is also strong with some of the European geographies because it always had very strong presence in Europe. So let's say if you are in European geography, France, Germany, etc., in those spaces, Sage X3 does really well overall from the localization perspective. Some of the other systems, they might not have as great support either from the ecosystem integration perspective in those geographies. So for that, Sage X3 is going to be a great fit. Some limitations to keep in mind: switch capabilities through third party, and that's a risk that we have covered with many other ERP systems. So this is going to be a very similar risk with Sage X3 as well. And this is not the core focus for Sage, even though they have come a long way. Now they are pumping a lot of gas for Sage X3 product portfolio as well. So this limitation might not be as true. Sage Intacct ecosystem is doing well. Sage X3 ecosystem is doing well as well in general. And you might find some of the accounting boilerplate, but that accounting boilerplate may be relevant for some of the regulated companies in the process manufacturing space. So that might not necessarily be a weakness, that might be a plus. So that's number 2. Number 1 on our list is Infor Cloud Suite M3. And Infor Cloud Suite M3 is a very unique system for the process manufacturing centric verticals. It has very strong retail component. It has very strong inventory capabilities as well, especially if you are going to have matrix inventory, and that is very common in general in the process manufacturing spaces. That's why Infor Cloud Suite M3 does really well. Overall, from the size perspective, it's definitely comparable to your Sage X3. Infor Cloud Suite M3 does really well in the upper mid market and maybe lower enterprise as well. Now they are targeting a lot more larger logos too, but it is going to have much deeper operational capabilities. That it might not have as deep finance capabilities what you are going to find with SAPs and Oracles of the world. So some other strengths to keep in mind: overall comprehensive process manufacturing capabilities, supports complex inventory as well as the products, and pre-integrated supply chain suite. So those are some of these strengths. Some limitations to keep in mind: it's expensive in general. This is a large product for the upper mid market centric companies, and not necessarily suitable for SMBs below $250 million in revenue. And ecosystem might not be as strong compared to some of the other systems on this list. So that's number one. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, we publish them on a weekly basis. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. This podcast is also available in the audio form on major podcasting platform. And we are going to link a report that is going to have much deeper analysis for this particular market segment. So you might want to check and download that. On that note, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.